Hello everyone and welcome to the Melbourne Traditionalists podcast episode 43. I'm Mark Moncrief from Upon Hope, and today I want to talk about traditionalism. This is the Melbourne Traditionalist podcast, and I wanted to talk about what traditionalism is, what traditionalism is not, and why it's a viable thing for the future. Because most people, when they think of tradition, they think of the past, and that's a reasonable thing to think. But tradition is also about the future, and I will talk about that, and I will also talk about our side, our thing, and what we should be concentrating on, what we should actually do for the future. So let's start with traditionalism. Now, traditionalism is made up of three things, what I call TOF: tradition, order, family. So let's start with tradition. What is tradition? Tradition does not mean everything from the past. And that's a mistake that many people make. Even some traditionalists make this mistake. But a tradition is something that is ongoing, continuing. So you can have new traditions and you can have old traditions. But the important thing is that a tradition is something that happened in the past and will happen again in the future. It's not something that's static. It's not something that's old and forgotten. A tradition is ongoing. And that's why tradition is important, because tradition is talking about our political institutions, our moral underpinnings, our society, our biology. It's talking about all the things in the past that we actually want to survive and to survive into the future. Now, sometimes there's a break with the past. Sometimes the past is so polluted that you can't carry it anymore. Well, traditionalism doesn't say, hey, just keep that polluted thing around. What it says is that we should go back to older forms, to when it worked, and modernize that. But what we shouldn't do is try to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has already been invented. Let's keep the wheel. And if the wheel is flat or it's no longer round, then you fix it. Right? You make the thing that already exists work. So that's why traditionalists are not revolutionaries. Even though we may not support the government, even though we may be quite happy for it to be overthrown. But we're not revolutionaries, not because we're not capable of fighting, but because ultimately our purpose is not to destroy things, it is to build things. The purpose of tradition is to maintain the connection between the peoples of the past, the people of the present, and the people of the future. And those three people are the people. So there is an idea called presentism, which says that the present is the most important thing. But that's not true, because we got here because of things that happened in the past. And when we forget that, then we actually undervalue ourselves. So those who believe in presentism, and most people do, whether they realize it or not, they're actually shortchanging themselves, because the things that happened in the past can protect us. You know, just in my own life, I've gone through trials and tribulations like everybody has. And I think to myself, I can't get through this. And then I remembered that, hey, other people have. That's an important lesson. And it's one that is easy to forget, that all of this has been done before. And, it might not be the exact same thing, but it's pretty close. Other people have known fear, other people have known triumph, other people have experienced exactly the same things that you and I experience and will experience. And that's important. Also, we don't always have to work out things in the present, because often the past has provided us with answers. But instead of actually looking at those answers, we are concentrated so much on the present that we don't go back and look at those answers. And we should. History is full of answers. We should always be looking at the past to provide for us. It can protect us. And that's something that those who are interested in presentism don't do. They don't use the past to protect us. But then there's the third point, the future. Everything that we do now will one day be in the past. And we need to have a future as individuals, as families, as countries, as a people. We need to always make sure that we are going to have a future. And traditionalism says, yes, there is a past. Yes, there is a present. And yes, there is a future. Traditionalism is not just about the past. It is about reconciling those three things so that we can actually have a future. And so much of the political and economic thinking and social thinking that we encounter every day in our lives is not about the future. It's about using up what we have in the past and about using what exists in the future. You just take one issue, the debt, the massive debt that we are all under, that we will all be forced to pay. Well, generations will be forced to pay that debt. Generations will be forced to pay it. That's not what traditionalists would do. That's what presentism does. Thinking about the present and thinking that that's the only place that we exist. Order. Order is the second great thing in traditionalism. And order is not law and order. It can be. It certainly encompasses that, but it's not as restrictive as that. Another way of saying order is hierarchy. Everything has its place. It has a rightful place. And just as everything has a rightful place, it has a wrongful place, a place it should not be. So for example, I live in a house, but I don't live in your house. So when I'm in my house, that is my rightful place. But if I'm in your house, that might not be my rightful place. And vice versa. There is a rightful place and there is a wrongful place. But that also applies to ideas. It applies to people and it applies to institutions. Once upon a time, a man's home was his castle and the government didn't have the authority to interfere in his private life, in his family life. And now it does. The government has decided that its rightful place is in our face. And traditionalism says, no, it's not. It says that there is an order and that the government's rightful place is dealing with foreign affairs and the military and law and order and justice, about administration. There are rightful things that the government should be doing. And then there are wrongful things. The government shouldn't be in our face telling us how we live our lives, but it should be there to actually help us live our lives. And we should support that because that's its rightful place. So order also says that man is not God. God is God. And we are mortal. But it also says that man is not just another animal, because animals are a lower order. They are not us. And certainly we should be respectful of animals. We should look after them. We shouldn't seek to hurt them or to destroy them simply for pleasure. But at the same time, they're not people, and they shouldn't be treated as people. You know, there's no such thing as a fur baby. That's just nonsense. I have pets. I love my pets, but they're not babies and they're not people. And that's how they should be treated. Now, everything, as I said, has its rightful order, its rightful place. And that's why we also believe in kingships. That's why we are monarchists, because we say that the natural order is that there is always someone in charge. Humans are hierarchical. So this idea that is constantly spread to us, that everyone's the same, everyone's equal, we absolutely reject that. We don't believe that people are equal. We don't believe that different races are equal. We don't believe that different ethnic groups are equal. We don't believe that different sexes are equal. We don't believe that different religions are equal, because we don't believe that individuals are equal. Each person is unique, just as different beliefs are unique, just as different ethnicities and races are unique. That doesn't necessarily mean that people are inferior or superior. It means that people are different, and that all of us will have advantages and disadvantages, flaws and virtues. And that's something that's sometimes forgotten by other political philosophies, where they talk about supremacy and they talk about people being inferior. Certainly, people are superior and inferior. Everyone is superior. Everyone is inferior. What we also think is that because humans are hierarchical, there will always be someone at the top of the pyramid, and that person should be a king. And the reason that they should be a king is because they have sons, and it's a multi-generational system. It means that they will always be replacing themselves. It means that there is a connection between our family and the family, the royal family. That there is a connection between us as individuals and the king. Now, even though we haven't met the king, he's still important in our lives. And when a king no longer exists, then we have politicians taking their place. And we all have seen how that works. You know, half the country loves the politician and half the country hates them. That's not how a king should be. We see that celebrities take the place of monarchy and aristocracy. We see that actors and musicians, people who are, well, let's face it, they can be quite degenerate people. And we're supposed to look up to them and admire them and emulate them. And that's entirely bad. We shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't be treated like that. And when we have a king, well, he may have a degenerate life as well, but we know that he's just one man, that eventually he will die, as we all do, and he will be replaced, just as we will. We will die. We will be replaced by somebody else. And that is the natural order. Back to that word, order. Everything has its rightful place and everything has its wrongful place. That's why we are traditionalists. That's why we support a monarchy. That's why we want an aristocracy of some kind. Exactly how it is, exactly how it performs is a matter for debate. But we don't want what we have now. We don't want every degenerate who is good looking and can pretend not to be themselves to be the ones that we all admire. Because let's face it, that's what an actor does. They're someone who pretends to be someone who they're not. That's not someone who we should admire. And the third is family. So family is not just about the people who we know. Obviously, you should be loyal to your brother. You should be loyal to your parents, and you should respect them, and you should love them. And, you should be loyal to your cousins as well. And you should be loyal to your people and to your ethnicity and to your race and ultimately to the human race. But each of those is diminishing. So I've heard this said about Somalians, I've heard this said about Arabs. I'm not sure where the exact phrase comes from or saying comes from, but it basically says that me against my brother and I against the family against the clan against the tribe against the world. That is not what I'm talking about at all. That is the complete opposite of what I am talking about. What I am talking about is mutual support. But you don't love the stranger more than that you love your own blood. You love your own blood because they are your past, they are your present, and they are your future. They're the ones who will look after you when other people won't. Or at least that's how it should be. Real life is very complex. And we don't always get the things that we want or even the things that we deserve. But that's the world that we want to work towards. A world where family is the centre of our lives. Where family actually means togetherness. And yes, people are people. We also believe that human nature cannot really be changed. It is pretty static. So, there will always be fallings out. There will always be, hey, I don't want to talk to you. And, that's all normal human behaviour. But in the same vein, you wouldn't betray your brother just to gain advantage. That's what family is. So they're the three things that traditionalists support. TOF. Tradition, order, family. Now I want to talk about the future, about the things that we should be concentrating on. Now there's one thing that we concentrate on a lot, and that's ideology, belief. And it's absolutely important that we know what we believe and that we support that we encourage that we push that. But at the same time, it can become a crux. And I find that a crutch, sorry. And I find that that's where we are at the moment as a movement, that we have determined what we believe. We have determined why we got to where we are. But we haven't then gone on to the next phase, which is actually working out how do we fix things for the future. Because we're a bit fixated in that belief, in that ideology. And there are two things that we have to concentrate on more than ideology. And one is policy, and the other is politics. Now, policy is about what we would do if we actually had power. If you're the local dog catcher, what would you do? What would you change? If you were in charge of the local police station, what would you change? What would you make different to how it is now? Or would you just be a seat warmer and just keep it as it is because that's tradition? Well, no, that's not. What we need to do is actually work out what we want to change and how we change it. So, for example, one of the ideas that I've been pushing heavily is remigration, that people who are citizens or permanent residents of Australia be given $100,000 and they give up their permanent residence, they give up their citizenship and they leave, they go back to where they came from. Now, there are reasons, actually good reasons, that people have against that idea, but I haven't heard another idea that would actually get rid of 100,000 people a year without any violence. Because for $10 billion, we can get rid of 100,000 people. Now, that's actually a good policy. Well, there are other people who say that it's not enough. Now, some people mean that in terms of money, but actually, I don't think that's the issue. What they're really talking about is policy. Now, I wrote an article called Why Remigration Needs to be Generous, and that's on my blog, and it was also put onto XYZ. On XYZ, there's a comment. Now, David Hiscock put it up, but he put it up on behalf of a writer who calls himself the Golem. This is an excellent article and an important contribution to the Australian nationalist movement because it is rational and calm, well considered, and as a policy proposal, it sits comfortably within parameters that the average Australian is willing to consider. I strongly encourage readers to read this article carefully and follow the links through to read the supporting policy material. It only takes a minute. I am endorsing Moncrieff in this instance is not necessarily because I agree with all aspects of the proposed policy, although I think it does have great merit. No, why I'm enthusiastic and encouraging you all to read it is because this is where we all need to be, at the policy table together, acting like intelligent adults and proposing real and workable policy solutions to the real and pressing problems that we face. You don't have to agree with this particular policy proposal, or you may agree with some parts but not others. But the real message here is, come to the policy table, have a seat, and join us in a serious and rational consideration of what might work and what might not work. This is the right direction for Australian nationalism. Instead of pointing out the latest outrage in the mainstream media or complaining to each other about how bad things are, we need to calmly and methodically work together to come up with policy proposals that can form the bones of a cohesive nationalist political movement, and one that mums and dads and the average non-engaged voter out there can look at and feel, yeah, I get that, and it's not crazy or dangerous. Moncrieff has set a policy table. It is time for the serious-minded to come and take their seats. We have work to do. I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, it's very flattering to me. I'm very appreciative of it, but he's absolutely correct. You know, it's time to get on with policy. It's time to think about how we really want the world to work and how we're going to make that. And that leads me to my second point, politics. Now, politics means, it actually has a lot of different meanings. But in this sense, I mean real world politics. I mean, how do we actually get our message out there? And how do we actually influence things? And primarily, that has to be through elections. We have to support candidates. And that means we have to run candidates. It means that we have to provide the support, the infrastructure for them, people to hand out how to vote cards and material beforehand. And we need to work out policy idea. You know, we can't just leave it up to one person. Hey, you're the candidate, work it all out. No, we have to have a background so that we can actually look after these people and actually support them. And every little bit helps. This is the thing, you know, it's true that many hands make light work. And that's what makes being in the movement today such an arduous job, is that there aren't that many hands. And, you know, people think, oh, if I join, then I have to, you know, I have to start writing articles and I have to do a podcast and I have to, you know, you have to do what you can do. That's the thing. There are things that every single person can do. You know, there are a lot of people who say, oh, you know, doxing's a real big issue. Well, it can be a big issue, but there are things that you can do that don't expose you to that. You know, does leafleting really expose you to doxing? Like you say, oh, well, it could. All right. What about stuffing envelopes? You know, with a message that's already been printed out. Is that, you know, could you do that at home? You know, just print it off yourself and take it to the letterbox and mail them out. You know, there's a lot of things that can be done that don't require you to actually expose who you are. And so many people are concerned with this issue, and I do understand it. I mean, I'm very open, but at the same time, maybe there's a price that I'm paying that I don't know about. But to be honest, you know, I don't think I've paid any higher price for being public than I did for having these views and being private. I don't see any difference in my life at all. It hasn't really improved. It hasn't really got worse. There's not much difference. So, you know, I think people do overemphasize this idea, and there are some people that it is important for. But again, you know, you can contact me, you can contact other people, and you can say, hey, what can I do? And there are ideas, there are things that can be done. And of course, the more people there are, there's more that can be done. I mentioned in the last episode about a letter writing campaign. You know, it's much more effective to have 100 people write to the Royal Children's Hospital about their gender dysphoria unit than it does 10. But 10's better than 1. You know, each one is an improvement on the last one. You know, we start low and we build bigger. So I guess there's really 3 things that we have to do. I said it's 2, but there's policy, there's politics, and there's organisation. You know, we need to organise and to actually support each other, and that includes financially. I've said this before. You know, if you're too busy to be of practical assistance, then that means you've probably got some money. And, you know, $5 a month is $60. That's a magazine subscription. You know, it may not sound a lot, but, you know, you've got 10 people doing that, that's $600. You know, $600, again, you know, it might not change the world, but it's going to help with, you know, printing leaflets. It's going to help with supporting websites. It's going to help, you know. And that's the thing we always have to remember, that every little bit can help. And it's that issue that I keep coming back with, that we're not getting enough of that little help. And, you know, if you want to contact me, you can contact me on my email. I'll leave that in the description box. And, you know, if you want to talk, we can talk. If you wanted to say, hey, I'd like to be involved somehow, we can talk about that. I can give you options. You know, a person contacted me after the Black Pill episode, and I gave him 3 options, and he picked one, right? And it's just that easy, right? Actually, I think I might get him to do 2 of those things. I think I might be in luck there. But you know, again, these are things that he can do. And again, you know, doxing is a big issue for him, but it's not something that I've exposed him to, because once I know someone's limitations, and we all have limitations, then we can make arrangements for that. We can make things work. And that's what we have to do. We have to make things work, because I really want things to change. I really want a better world. And this isn't the world that I wanted ever. Now I'm going to leave it there. We're nearly at the 30-minute mark. Thank you very much for listening. And if you would like to support my work, you can make a donation at Subscribestar. You can do a one-off, or you can do a subscription. Even a $5 a month. There's $60. I'm very happy with that. You know, there's the option to give $1 a month. Well, you know, if there's enough people who do that's good money too. What I want to emphasize is that we need to do stuff. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. and have a good week.